Hey, welcome back to United Opposition. We were not here last week. I was out of town. Sorry for missing you guys, but we are here today and a lot has happened. And we're going to be talking a little bit, Marshall, about what? Uh-oh, maybe Marshall can't hear me.
There you are.
Oh, we're going to be talking a little bit about what?
You froze. You froze.
All right, we're talking a little bit about what, Marshall?
War.
War. Here we go. Good to be back. I was out celebrating my anniversary last week and thought maybe it wasn't such a good idea, but I thought maybe I'll still try to do the show from the hotel. And then it turns out our plans changed and I couldn't do it last week. But maybe it's a good thing that I didn't try to come in on my anniversary weekend. Hey, I'm still going to do the podcast. So sorry I missed you guys last week. A lot has happened. Tell us a little about what's happened, Marshall. What's happened in the world?
Well, first of all, we see where Scott's priorities are misplaced. And then second of all, yeah, there's this little kerfuffle, I guess, in the Middle East or something.
Kerfuffle. Gosh, you got to get the words right. Kerfuffle.
Yeah, kerfuffle. Yeah, whatever. But yeah, some late unpleasantness.
Basically, the movie Top Gun Maverick came to life real.
Yeah, sort of.
Everybody knew, even though they didn't mention the name in the movie, everybody always knew that they were referring to Iran. Are we going to say Iran or Iran?
Yeah, Persia, right?
Yeah.
But well, they're right down to the F-14s, which they infamously had up until some days ago. I don't know if they've all been destroyed, but it seems like they may have been.
Which is because that is an awesome plane. It's one of the, because you have, I mean, you like aviation. I like aviation and warbirds in particular. And there's flying examples of so many warbirds, American warbirds from the history, but every F-14 in the United States was decommissioned and destroyed so that no parts could be made available that Iran could get a hold of because they still use. So one of the greatest, most amazing looking, beautiful fighter jets in the United States has ever had. There are no flying examples of it effectively anymore. Like it's just non-existent now. And that's so right. Sad. It's such a great looking plane and a very functional too.
Yeah. They gave it upgrades through the end of its service life, up into the 90s even. They were doing upgrades. I think they came out with the F-14D, which could actually drop bombs.
Well, they were using it. It was active until 2011, I think 2010 or 2011 it was when they finally decommissioned them.
Yeah, a little bit late for the plane that it was. You know, it was a 70s era plane. But anyway, we digressed.
Probably all gone now. But yeah, I was actually pretty surprised. But it's like when I found out the details, I was like, man, they literally did almost other than flying through the canyon low and popping up to like it was dropped 2 bombs, one to go through and make the first hole, and the second one to go through and hit it even deeper. They had the Tomahawk missiles launched ahead of them to hit. And it was this one of the rare military operations that effectively went off without a hitch?
Well, I think the only problem was I'm not sure if we notified Iran before we made the strikes, but we may have. Mm-hmm. And it appears that Iran has probably relocated their nuclear material elsewhere. It does not appear that they left it behind. Of course, it doesn't take a rocket scientist or a nuclear scientist to know that they're coming for this. And if you want to preserve that material, you have to move it to keep it out of harm's way. And it's very likely that that's happened.
So they might still have the material, but effectively we've prevented them from making any more?
Yeah, that seems to be the case, unless they either have secret facilities that we don't know about, or they are able to rebuild those facilities elsewhere, reconstitute everything elsewhere. But them getting their hands on that material, I think, will be very hard to do. So unless they actually already have something, it will be hard for them to reconstitute the program. The latest leak says that, the strikes are a complete failure and we only set them back by a matter of months. I'm not sure I would agree with that. I think we've given them a bigger setback than that. Um, but that's just my armchair general opinion on this.
Do you
Um,
think how comparatively, how big was this hit? I mean, as far as like, so you have a couple of boxers entering the ring, and this is the first strike. Was this like a hit to the glove? Was this a jab to the head? Was this a right hook and just completely clobbered their jaw?
well, I think it was a very well executed attack, and it shows the cutting edge of our ability. So,
Mhm.
in that context, it's impressive.
Yeah.
From a strategic viewpoint, however, it doesn't seem to have done much of anything. Yes, it destroyed the sites that were already somewhat damaged or heavily damaged. We wiped out the scientists, which was not the product of our strikes. The Israelis did that before we ever showed up. And
Mhm.
I really think that it's the human element, the destruction of the people who were working on these projects that's actually going to set them back. Uh,
Yeah.
and ultimately, the targets we hit, the regime targets, as we would call them, that's actually the hammer blow that was mostly delivered by the Israelis. Um, so, I'm impressed by what we were able to do and how we were able to pull it off. I think, yeah, I'm always surprised by how clever our military planners and engineers are.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, I don't think in the grand scheme of things that this did much. Yeah, I think the Israelis did 98% of the work, 99% of the work, really. And
We just hit
well,
what they couldn't.
what's that?
We just hit what they couldn't.
Right, right. But these sites are already damaged. The
We hit
materials
what
already
nobody
moved
can, right?
out. The scientists were already dead. You
No,
know,
nobody in the world can do a strike like what we just did.
Yeah, well, I think more than anything, it demonstrates to the world that we have unique military capabilities that nobody else on the planet has.
Mhm.
And to see what Israel did, it once again we demonstrated that Russian hardware is worthless against a real opponent. A real technologically sophisticated opponent. There's actually this whole hypothesis in history that the Soviet Union collapsed after the first Gulf War because all of the Soviet generals realized what Western hardware and technology can do to their equipment. And
Yeah.
that their entire strategy, which is this massive overwhelm, spam the enemy
Yeah.
with firepower, is bankrupt, and it will not work against the Western technology. And so that created internal
Or in modern
turmoil and
warfare.
upheaval. You know,
Yeah, it doesn't
um,
modern warfare.
right? Well, exactly.
It's
Uh,
lines and lines of British redcoats standing up against a squad of US Marines with automatic weapons.
yeah, pretty much, pretty much. So I think the real question, though, is first of all, I can't tell you who won. If we're going to call it the 12-day war, first of all, I can't guarantee that it's over. I'd like to think that it's over. There seems to be a little bit of back and forth that's going on, but
Mhm.
it's probably just disaffected actors or terrorists or whatever who don't want the peace, and so they're trying to hurl drones at Israel or something to provoke them to keep going or something. But whatever.
Yeah.
I think it's in the world's interest for this to stop. But the question is, who won the engagement? And in the short term, we can sit here and say that Israel won because they achieved their stated objectives, which is to stop or delay the Iranian nuclear program. But Israel, or not Israel, the Iranians had a victory celebration today, and they're claiming victory. And from
Of
their
course,
perspective,
people are
it probably,
uninformed.
well, there's that, but you have to understand the regime is still in power. To me, I think that the regime should have been the target. The nuclear program stands or falls based on the regime, and it's a lot easier to eliminate the regime targets than the nuclear program, which is buried beneath a bunker like a mile deep or something insane. You know, if on the other hand, if you clear off the top level of Iranian government and you destroy their command and control and coordination capabilities, it's called CCC, is how it's abbreviated. If you wipe out that ability, which is their ability to make decisions and communicate those decisions to the troops in the field. Suddenly, the government will collapse because there's nobody to prop it up. There's no force behind the government. And I
And
still
the United
go
States,
ahead.
the United States can do that without troops on the ground, right?
Yeah, we could do that. We need intel. We're going to need human intelligence, so we need spies on the ground,
But
or sympathetic
not troops on
persons.
the ground.
No, we don't need troops
Troops
on
on
the
the ground,
ground. But if
troops on
we
the
know,
ground are referring to troops.
like Trump said, we know where the Ayatollah is hiding. Well, that's an easy strike, and he's
Yeah.
gone now. He's erased from the equation, and you just take off, the top 2 or 3 or 4 layers of governing officials, and you get down to where it's just the generals or high-ranking political officials. Suddenly, they're going to get into conflict with each other because you get a succession crisis, and that's how you collapse the government. You get a civil war, and then you just bet on the meaner side, the bigger, badder, meaner side, and you make that side loyal to you because you provide them with the money, the weapons, and the support that you need. And now you have your own little evil authoritarian regime that is loyal to you.
But this really hasn't worked in the past, is our arguments you've made that this has not worked in the past. So why would that be the way to go now?
Well, I think it does work. It doesn't necessarily work out over the long term, but we're pretty good at toppling governments and installing tin pot dictators, and we have mixed degrees of success. So you can look at people. I'm trying to think of some examples. There are certainly examples. Both sides during the Cold War did this commonly.
Yeah,
Look
yeah.
at Castro in Cuba, Allende in Argentina was deposed by the West and replaced with a brutal dictator, who was pro-Western. And so, we have these cases throughout history where this happens. It's not good for the people. I think it's evil, it's dirty, but everybody does it.
Mm-hmm.
And the end result is, from a political perspective, if we can clear Iran off the map as a player against us and flip them into an ally, even if they're a dirty ally, they are repressive and horrible, which they are now.
Mm-hmm.
But they are aligned with the West as opposed to with Russia and China and North Korea. Suddenly now we have flipped a major player on the world stage, and
But
our
this is
power.
on, right?
What's
That's why
that?
we're fighting. This has already happened with Iran, right? This is why we're fighting F-14s.
Well, exactly, because at one time
Setting
Iran, you had the Shah of Iran, who
Yeah.
arguably was not the nicest guy, to whom we sold and provided weapons and propped him up, and there was a popular revolution, a religious rebellion, and we get the Islamic Republic, which is absolutely opposed to us because of our support for the Shah and for Israel. And so here we are. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, I mean, you can do this both ways. None of this is particularly healthy for humanity, or nor does it bode well for our species. I don't know that it's the wisest strategy to adopt, but it's
Well,
how it's done.
you and I were joking a little bit before we started on here. So our title is War, and we were both singing that song.
Yeah,
War.
right. What is it good for?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a line in there. Guys, I showed my daughter the movie Rush Hour with Chris Tucker and Jackie Chan, where they're singing that song, and it plays a big part in there. So I put it on my playlist when I'm driving my car. So I was hearing it on the way over here, and there's a line that it's in there. It says that talks about, it's like, it's no good. It's only a friend of the Undertaker. We talk about, you say you got to fight for peace, but there's got to be a better way. With humanity, is there a better way? Is war really the only option that we have as human beings?
Yeah, absolutely not. But I mean, from a leftist perspective, it's inevitable because of capitalism. And prior to capitalism, we could go to feudalism.
Right. Stop. War existed long before capitalism. That's a red herring. Just stop.
And that's what I was just saying. And before that, there was feudalism and so on. Basically, war is the product of a power dynamic and imbalance. And throughout history, as societies become more equitable, war becomes less frequent, less necessary. But there's always going to be a conflict because the people who have all the money and all the power and all the control are always going to try to hoover up more money, more power, and more control. And they're going to, because that's just human nature. They're going to gather as much of that to themselves, and they're going to jealously hold on to it to the point they're going to be cruel to the masses below.
But
But
it does
eventually it reaches a critical point where the masses rise up and overthrow.
it
That's
does
going to
seem,
be war.
right, but it does seem that countries that have adopted what I guess we could call Western beliefs of you look at most of Europe, you look at most of you look at United States, you look at modern Japan and places that have kind of adopted these Western ideas that those countries don't typically engage in violent war until something else is done to them.
Correct. Right. But they adopt socialist policies and have to give large sums back to the people in order to keep the people happy and pacified. And the people will be happy and pacified if they have their bread in circuses, which goes all the way back to Romans. So people have, education and healthcare, clean air, water, food. They have housing. They feel that they can, have job security. They feel that they can take vacations and relax. They get breaks. That's all most people want. And so as long as people have that, they're going to be peaceful by and large. And that also applies to people in the Middle East. So
hold on. So Americans have that right now?
We're losing it. We've had it. We're losing it. And that's why I think we're seeing so much dissatisfaction in this country, because we don't have all of those things like our European friends have, and we are beginning to lose things that we have had, that our parents had. You look at rates of home ownership, you look at the fact that we have no paid maternity leave, we have no guaranteed health care, we have to pay for our education. Even recently, I think it was the state of Missouri did this thing where they raised the minimum wage, and I think they gave out sick leave to people, and the state legislature revoked all of that. Even though the people by popular vote demanded it, they revoked those things, took those things away from the people. That is not a way to create a happy and content population. I've talked about the fact that on my Facebook that I think we're in a state of civil war. And I could be wrong about that, but I'm not sure that I'm wrong about that.
It's just changing again.
What's that?
It's just changing the definitions again, trying to co-opt the power of the word civil war to try to make it mean what you want.
Well, I don't know what you want to call it or whatever, and I don't care about what you call it. You can call it again, rainbows and puppies. It is what it is, though.
Words matter. We talk about this all the time. Words matter.
Okay, you can call it whatever you want to call it. Okay.
I want to call it the truth and reality what it is. You're the one who wants to call it whatever you want to call it. I want to call it what it really is.
Okay, Scott, what is it?
Be straightforward.
All right, you tell me what terminology you want to use.
Not civil war.
You tell me what terminology you want to use.
It's not civil war. So
okay, we won't call it that. What would you like to call it?
I don't know, upheaval, unrest, whatever you want to call it, but it's not.
Okay, that's fine by me. Cool. And that's fine. We call it that. Okay. But the reason why there's, why you get conflict in societies is because there's an imbalance between the people at the top and the people at the bottom. And so over time, periodically, there's a bit of a reset, especially when the people at the top get a little too top heavy. Boom, you get a revolution, right? Where it goes like this. Actually, I'm kind of like this, Of course, a true revolution goes all the way back around, and that's the true definition of a revolution. And the
revolution then really what you want?
What's that?
Revolution really what you want?
No, it's not what anyone really wants. Revolutions are always betrayed. That's the French Revolution. The French Revolution is the quintessential example of a revolution. However, it's also hard to argue with Marx, which is that over time, things have become better and more equitable for people. There is ultimately going to be another stage of conflict, in specifically capitalism, because the nature of the beast is going to pit the owner against the worker, and eventually the workers will outnumber and overpower the owners and take over, and that's where you get socialism, then communism, and happy utopia allegedly. But we don't know that that's really going to happen because human nature, right?
Not possible.
Right, human nature. So, but at the same time, I think we need to, the closest, most sustainable example that I've seen is democratic socialism, which is still a form of capitalism. But it is a form of capitalism where taxes are very high and a lot of goods and services and things are given to the people, bread and circuses, if you want, to keep them happy and content. But it seems to work. The problem, of course, it's still capitalism. Capitalism is inherently unsustainable over the long term. But for right now, it works really well. So if we want peace in places like the Middle East, we have to deal people in, whether they're the Palestinians or whatever. I think that's an excellent example, though, is the Palestinians. These are people who are forced to live in grueling conditions of hardship and poverty because there are terrorists circulating among them, which grow out of those conditions. And if you want to eliminate that, you have to change that economic dynamic. You have to eliminate the economic incentive to be a terrorist. And you do that by dealing people into the prosperity.
But don't you have to get rid of the terrorists first?
You'll get rid of the terrorists organically through soft power. The
Because
terrorists will age out of the system. They'll get killed or die. They'll get injured. They will quit. They will lay down their arms once they have something to quit for. The reason,
right? But food and supplies are constantly sent to Palestinian, and they're completely the terrorists there, the terrorist leaders there redirect those things in the wrong direction. That people don't get it because the terrorist leaders don't give it to them.
Yeah, I'm talking big picture, long term here. Big picture, long term.
We got to get rid of the terrorists first.
Okay, and I'm not going to object to that. Of course, you have to get rid of them, but there are different ways to do it. You start with the leadership and you go after the leadership, but you have to be targeted and pinpoint and accurate. You're not going to get all the people.
So I agree. Get them. You said this now for both Palestinians, the Palestinian conflict, and also for Iran. And I'm curious about this because it seems like the tactical and strategic thing to do, which is to take out leadership. Is that acceptable in modern warfare, or is that considered war crime? Can you target leadership only and just take them out? Isn't it like on the world stage, isn't it illegal to assassinate a world leader?
Right. Yeah. There's international law. And just for the record, both Israel and Iran, and probably the United States by its actions, have all three very clearly violated international law. But whatever, because in times of war, laws are silent. So I think it is a viable military strategy to destroy the leadership of a country if you want to defeat that country. Because generally it's the leadership that's the driving force. It's the leadership that is the genius behind it. And if you eliminate them and power devolves now to the next level, you get to a point where you have multiple persons who can claim the right of succession to become the next leader. And invariably, they will enter into conflict with each other to become that leader. You might have to go 2 or 3 or 4 layers down, but once you do that, you collapse the system internally. You create internal division, and then you just divide and conquer that way. And that's really the most efficient way to do it. And in the big scheme of things, if you're going to do it and you want to do it quickly and you want to minimize suffering and destruction, that's probably the way to do it. The fact of the matter is, what I think makes war particularly immoral is the fact that you take people on both sides who have no knowledge or beef with each other, and you force them to fight each other to the death, while the people at the top, the ones who are calling the shots, who have the beef with each other, sit back in virtual comfort and have 3 square meals a day and watch it all on their television. That's absurd.
You said you're saying the president should go fight, grab a gun and go fight the battle.
Oh, heck yeah. I think we should do Thunderdome, man.
Be serious. I'm asking a serious question.
Yeah. I actually do think that, if they can't talk it out between them, like we talk our differences out, then maybe the people who have the beef, maybe there needs to be a vote before any country can fire a weapon in anger. And all the people who vote in favor of firing the weapon, they're the ones who go fight, and the other ones who don't can stay back. If it could ever be done that way. But
you have to think for just a half a second about why that wouldn't work.
Well, yeah, of course it wouldn't work, which is why it's a great system, because once it no longer works, then maybe nobody will do it.
You got Star Trek thinking.
Yeah, I know it is. It is. But the thing is, we either have to get, if we're going to survive as a species, especially in a world where our technology is becoming increasingly lethal and increasingly proliferated, we need to figure this stuff out. And if we can't figure it out, and I'm not sure that we can, we're doomed. We're doomed as a species. Okay. That's the score, whether we like it or not.
Jesus.
Yeah, well, I don't care how we do it. We can do Jesus. We can do Jesus. We can do Allah. We can do the United Nations. We can do Star Trek. We can do. I don't care how we do it, but we better frickin' figure it out quick, because time is running awful short on the environment. And nuclear proliferation.
I know I'm getting religious in this side out, but that literally is that is why you need Jesus. That is why it's not just any of these other, this is where it's going. This is where humanity is leading us. And it's honestly unavoidable, because that's who we are. That's why we need a savior. And this and the savior is what's going to save us. That's why he's called the savior. And so even to save us from ourselves, but the humanity does not have a long future. It just doesn't. That's why we need it.
No, not on a planet with finite resources, with
nothing to do with
systems like capitalism.
Our planet has
overconsumed by nature.
Our planet has way more resources than we will ever live out because of our nature. Our nature will destroy ourselves long before the planet runs out of resources.
Well, exactly, right? You can mine nickel or steel or iron. You don't mine steel, you mine iron and smelt it into steel. You can mine these things and consume them, but they're still there. They're just in scrap form. But the point is we will take all of the resources that are easy to access. We will strip mine the entire Earth's crust and throw these at each other to fight over the next hill or deposit of iron. Yeah. And the end result is we will destroy each other. You are correct. I think you are literally correct. And I tell people this all the time. The Earth will be fine. The Earth's going to do great once we're gone. Even if we go up in a nuclear holocaust, the Earth is going to bounce back. It's us who aren't going to make it. And, well.
That's already in the cards.
Yeah. So, yeah, you're right, and Jesus would be great. But I don't care if it's Jesus or Allah or AI or Cosmic Muffin or Star Trek or what. I don't care what it is. We just better figure it out, because the time is getting short.
Time is getting short. Yes. I guess it sounds, I don't know. I don't want to sound defeatist or elitist, everybody who sits here and says humanity needs to find a way through is just not realistic. Everyone says it's prideful to think that we can be smart enough to beat this.
Yeah, that's why I think in the AI may be the way to go. And I think that biological humanity will go extinct and will be replaced by whatever AI creations, and that's going to go out and explore the universe maybe. That, or Jesus is going to come again and say, all right, you guys had a good run, but thanks. Hop on board the chariot. Well, no, not you, but you and you.
It can be you right now.
It can be. Yeah. Yeah, it can be. It can be.
Yep. That's what we as Christians are called to. Over here, this is the rescue ship. Come on over.
The second ark, right? The ark. But how many people made it onto the ark, Scott?
Well, that was a completely different covenant, but sure, if you want.
Everybody was invited, weren't they?
No.
No,
No,
no, it didn't tell everyone he could. It didn't warn you.
Noah's family was picked.
Well,
No,
all right.
that's why it's different, because now it is everyone is invited.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus said, everyone's invited. It's your choice.
So you think if you built an ark, how many people you think would get on it with you?
Surprisingly, not as many as should,
Mm-hmm.
as we can see, because the ark is the church. The ark is the church, your local church. That's the ark. Come join us.
Well, you'd have to get along while you're on it. It's the whole colony ship analogy, right? You've heard that there's a colony ship, and you're going to be, put in charge of it, and you have to get along with everybody. And then they're like, well, what's the name of the colony ship? Oh, it's called Earth.
Again, a lot of things work at one scale that don't work at another scale. It's completely reasonable to expect something to work at one scale, and it's completely unreasonable to expect that same thing to work at another scale. I was talking, my wife and I were having a conversation about this. Communism works on a small scale. Communism absolutely works on a community scale. It absolutely works. It cannot, but it doesn't scale up. You can't get past human nature at a certain scale. And so it just doesn't scale up.
Right. Well, the theory of it makes sense, but the fact of the matter is, again, you're dealing with human beings and you're dealing with groups. Yeah. There's still competition.
Small enough, and if the group is small enough, those people can make it work.
Yeah, but there's still competition even within the groups. See, that's within the group,
but it's manageable at a certain size. It's not manageable past a certain size.
Correct.
Digressed. We've talked for 32 minutes about war-ish. As human beings, it's in this.
I think we have to deal people in. We really do. We have to create a floor beneath which we don't let people fall. If we create a strong enough floor and provide people with the basics of a decent living, people will not want to turn to extremism. They will not want to fight. There will be no incentive for war, at least among the people.
And so right now, we almost to the point where we have the technology to match the movie Winter Soldier, to where they had those carriers that could target specific people and just take them out. It's like, is that where we're at? Is that the answer? Is just send it up. We have a list of all these bad people, just take them out and then send money to everybody else. Is that the answer?
I haven't seen the movie, so I don't really know the story. It sounds dystopian to me.
But isn't that what you just were describing? Take out the bad leaders that we know are bad, and then
no, I didn't say take anyone out. What I said was we create a floor beneath which we don't
earlier in our topic. Earlier when we were talking, you were saying the strategic idea is to take out the leadership.
That's what you do when you're trying to collapse a nation so that you can conquer it.
Right. And then and going forward with what you said is the solution, then we help them rebuild. So you're saying the answer is identify who we say are the bad targets, eliminate the bad targets, and then throw money at the people who remain.
Well, the question then is who decides who's bad, right? Well,
yeah, but is that a viable solution?
Well, it's certainly a problematic one, but it would be effective. It would work, but it would be morally problematic. In fact, morally bankrupt, I think. But you could do it. Yeah, just like all other war.
And so it's just deciding at what point is that acceptable?
Which is most of life, I suppose. Most of the decisions we make. So
wow. Well, this has been United Opposition talking about war with Scott and Marshall. We'll be back next week. Who knows what's going to happen in the news and what we'll be talking about? Because hey, let's have this subject, and then the next week let's talk about this, and then Thursday something happens. Okay, on Tuesday, then Saturday happens. Like, oh, I guess we're going to talk about this, and then Monday happens. Like, oh, I guess we're going to change it again. So who knows what's going to happen? Whatever's going on in the world, we'll see what we're talking about next week. But we will catch you next time, Marshall.
Scott, we'll see you soon.
All right, God bless you guys. Bye.